All right, I'm here with Alan, and we're going to talk about poor Elon. But first, I've got DeepMind. Um, there's an article on Ars Technica about DeepMind. I'm amazed at the giant leaps forward that artificial intelligence has made. And now what they're doing is developing new math proofs that no one could prove. I didn't know this, but when you multiply a matrix like 4 by 4, I thought the only way to do it was to multiply each element one by one. So you'd have, if you have n elements, you have n squared computations. But apparently, there are ways to speed that up by cleverly combining the operations so you can reuse previously calculated results. And the last improvement was 60 years ago. Somebody found a way to speed it up. And DeepMind has twice found ways to beat the previous record and speed up those computations. So as people are worried about the artificial intelligence replacing us, they are getting better than us at real math, just like they got better than us at real chess. So it's very impressive. And if you want to be paranoid about it, you could say that the chance of the AI is muscling into more and more areas previously regarded as only a human could do that, like art. So,
but not self-driving cars.
Well, you could argue about that. I mean, the last time you said they're not as good as people at driving cars yet, but they're, I think not yet, but I don't think that'll be far away. I mean, I think the current progress is enough that, anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, we're obviously not watching the same videos.
Well, I've seen
of self-driving cars.
Well, yeah, I'm just aware from my years of riding a bicycle how terrible people are. That's why. But anyway.
Oh, yes.
I think we're up to the level of like the lower 20% of drivers,
which isn't saying much.
It isn't, but the idea of average human beings driving a car has always sort of horrified me.
Well, I totally agree, and that's why I no longer ride a bicycle on the roads myself.
Yeah, well, I concluded that I learned, and experimentally, I discovered the cars were not the biggest risk. I was my own worst enemy. All my problems occurred all by myself. So the cars around here are pretty good at dodging bikes, even more than you'd think. But anyway, it was not successful, and I did it in Texas, though. Anyway, so let's hear about Elon Musk.
Yes, Elon Musk's always in the news, but in this time it's in regards to his Starlink company, his satellite internet service, and what's going on in Ukraine. There was a story about a week ago about how Ukrainian forces are having trouble with their Starlink boxes, that apparently at times they were losing their connection to Starlink while in the field. And this was actually having a big impact on operations. So during the counteroffensive in Kherson and in the north around Izum, apparently suddenly the connection was getting really spotty, or they were even losing it for the reconnaissance teams that were advancing farther beyond the lines. And so there was real concern. Well, is Musk, is he wavering? There was rumors that he'd had some conversations with Vladimir Putin, and that Putin had convinced him that Crimea belonged to Russia, and that Musk misunderstood the history of Crimea, et cetera, et cetera. And then Musk tweeted out that there should be another round of votes. That they should do another round of a referendum, and in the 4 contested oblasts in Ukraine, and that should decide the outcome. And which is a very naive notion, totally unreasonable.
It seems like the war would have to be over before you could remotely have a fair election.
Exactly. I mean, it's very clear that those so-called votes were nothing of the kind. 97% of the population of Luhansk voting to join Russia. I don't think so.
Well, and they just were voting with like a military guy with a gun watching you.
Right. They had soldiers going to people's doors.
And if you voted against you, they would put you on the list for retaliation later. So,
Yes,
but
exactly.
now I saw the tweet. What he said is, if you could have like a fair election like we have here, and I said, yeah, well, if pigs could fly, you could.
Right. So it's just totally naive. And we've seen this from Elon Musk many times before. He is very naive.
Yeah.
As much as he would like to think of himself as a ruler of the world, he is a very naive guy.
Well, this is the classic tech bro thing that everybody hates. I was just talking to my class about it last night. Like when Google tried to make a social network, they said, "Oh, we'll just slam you in the same group with everybody you send an email to and tell them everything you're doing, and everybody will just get along." It comes from
Right.
this, this tech bro culture. They live in sort of a collegial, rich party boy kind of environment, and they think everybody else does too. They don't know real people have problems.
Yeah, it's a very cloistered, insular world.
Yeah.
And so a guy like Musk is clueless about how the real world works, and yet he has tremendous power because of the Starlink system. And the Ukrainian military basically lives and dies by the Starlink.
So why did they go down? Was it just Russians jamming it, maybe? What?
Well, that's not clear. And Musk did tweet that that's classified. So yes, it is possible that the Russians are jamming it. And in particular, when the Ukrainians have been able to make advances, they've had to actually communicate directly with Starlink and say, hey, we've captured this territory in this area over here. Please turn on Starlink in this area.
Oh, okay, because he does try to deny it to the Russians, right?
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how much communication happens there and if he cares or not. Musk claims to have not communicated directly with Putin, so don't really know what that means.
Well, he originally donated this for free to the Ukrainians to show that he was strongly on their side.
Well, yes, but as it turns out, Starlink wasn't nearly as generous as Musk tried to present them to be. Most of the money for the Starlink satellite units has actually come from the U.S. government, the U.K., and the Polish government. So, yes, Starlink did donate a few of those units, but they've got tens of thousands in the field. Ukraine does over 20,000 that have been donated. And when each one costs like between, I think, $450 and $800, that's a lot of money that Starlink has not donated.
Yeah.
But what's interesting now is that Starlink is going to the U.S. government hat in hand and saying, we're poor, we're broke, we need money. Because it's not just the cost of the base units, it's also the cost of just providing the services. And apparently Starlink claims that they're giving each one of those units, those tens of thousands of units, the ultra platinum package, which is very expensive. It's like $4,500 a month or something like that. And so now they're going to the U.S. government and saying, we need to be funded for this. And we would like $120 million for just the rest of 2022 and $400 million for the year 2023. And so now there's some questions. Well, did Musk turn it off because as a bargaining tactic so that they get paid for this? Or
and that seems really bogus because I think Starlink is not widely deployed yet. So his satellites are probably sitting up there doing nothing. So it's probably actually no marginal cost for him.
Well, I don't know. I just don't know about how this all works. I don't think many people do outside of SpaceX, or excuse me, Starlink.
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely a lot of units on the ground in Ukraine.
Sure, and the hardware was a real donation, but the service is not much of a cost, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah, everybody's pretty fed up with Musk again, but that's I've been following this, and my feeling is that Musk needs to do this just like Donald Trump needs to do this because his Tesla is a meme stock. It's trades at 10 or 20 times what it's worth because of his fame. His number one contribution to the company is to stay in the headlines every day, even negative headlines. That is propping up his stock price to the stratosphere, making his stock like Dogecoin. If he was to just be a conservative CEO and just shut up and only talk business, his stock price would fall to like 20 or 30 times earnings like it should, and that would be a huge loss to all his investors.
Yeah, he's made a brand out of being a tech visionary.
Just like Donald Trump, he's made a brand out of being an internet celebrity.
Yeah, well, I would argue that at least Musk is semi-capable of doing a few things, whereas Trump is incompetent at everything except large-scale hucksterism.
Yes, I think he's the world's greatest social engineer.
Yeah, that's true.
And that appears to be the most valued thing in America. Anyway, right, so there's a Filecoin is something I saw on the register that was pretty interesting. It is a storage platform where I think, yeah, it wasn't entirely clear, but it reminds me of a previous system I heard about years ago where you would donate some storage on your machine, like the Interplanetary File System, and they want to be responsible for archiving all the world's data forever, because this distributed thing across the internet will be the safest way to store all the data, which sounds like it might even be true if done correctly. And they claim they can store enormous amounts of data at 95% lower cost than Amazon's cheapest storage. And without any lock-in, it's distributed among many people, and they organize it on a blockchain with Filecoin, like a cryptocurrency. And they say they're getting some customers, it's growing. The problem is, though, it's extremely slow. It can take hours to download your stuff and even longer to upload your stuff. So that's why I say all the enterprises just couldn't care less. They'll just pay for ordinary storage that's fast and reliable. But this does sound like sort of the distributed, decentralized dream of just using everybody's excess hard disk space all over the place for much cheaper. I've seen various versions of this come and go. I don't know if this is going to work, but the general idea seems pretty clever. It's basically BitTorrent.
Yeah, it seems like a very clever idea. I just don't know if it's going to work out. Storage is so cheap, and a lot of people don't use, more than a fraction of their hard disk space or the storage on their devices, their phones, their tablets. So
yeah, so there's all this storage sitting there, and almost everything you save, you lose it within a couple of years, and it's gone.
Right.
Like I keep clicking, going to Google, search for something. When I go to links, they're dead. So they're right that there is kind of a need to preserve stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
So, well, we'll see if they manage to get it right this time. I've seen several proposals like this go by. All right, and so it looks like we're being mean to China again.
Well, certain Chinese companies, Axios got a leak or received information from internal deliberations at the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, that the FCC is now circulating a draft order to essentially ban all sales of Huawei and ZTE devices in the U.S.
My first thought is they don't have the legal right to do that, but I guess they do. Everything has to be FCC certified, right?
Right.
But that's mostly about it just not interfering with other devices, I thought.
Well, I guess they have some additional powers, and there are legitimate national security concerns. I mean, we can't get this wrong. A telecommunications device is potentially an eavesdropping device, and it is not that hard, not trivial, but it's also not that hard to backdoor these devices on a large scale and allow for eavesdropping. After all, the NSA did this with Cisco routers. We learned this thanks to Edward Snowden.
Well, I guess so, but then I guess that will never change, right? We'll never be able to import anything from a hostile nation. Maybe that's what we should do. I don't know.
Yeah, it may come to that. Yeah.
It seems almost racist to me. That's the thing that bothers me.
Well, yes, and I think that cannot be understated, that there is absolutely the possibility of chauvinism and racism. And after all, there's a very long history of racism being directed towards China by the U.S.
I mean, if you go to any store, I think 90% of everything there is made in China. So if we're already trusting a lot. I don't know. I wonder how practical it is to just ban everything from China. It seems like they're too big and important to do that.
Well, I think that's exactly the case. China is the workshop of the world, and the U.S. economic policy for the past 60 years has favored offshoring of manufacturing. This
Yeah,
was
it seems
this
to me
was a
like
real
we can't.
decision undertaken by the U.S. government
Yeah.
to de-emphasize manufacturing and shift the economy towards a service economy, and that may turn out to have been a bad decision.
Well, it might
Uh,
be, but I'm just thinking from sort of from a cultural legal point of view, it's just racist if you ban everything from China. It would be better to have proof that this product is bad before and ban a specific product that has a specific defined defect rather than just tarring them all with a broad brush, I think.
yes, I'm sure that there is some kind of intelligence that we don't know about.
You got a lot of
I'm
faith in the
sure there
government.
are reasons, given the sensitivity of the
Oh,
matter. I'm sure there are reasons that the U.S. government will not share publicly.
you have faith in Big Brother, which I do not have. I mean, I would assume those reasons are something like winning the midterms or something.
Well, it's not just that I have faith in the U.S. Big Brother. I have high skepticism for the Chinese Big Brother, and there's no question that the Chinese government um, is autocratic and that it surveils its citizens and that it's engaged in genocide.
Yeah,
And
yeah, they've done that.
yeah, so these are all reasons to be wary of the Chinese government, certainly,
So
and
would you
not
like
to
to
give
ban,
the
so
benefit of
would
the
you like
doubt.
to ban TikTok too then?
I'm not going that far, no.
That seems like it's justified by exactly the same logic.
Yes, Uh, you have a point there. You have a point there.
And
I
it might
mean,
even be right. The thing that bothers me in both cases, it's presumption of guilt without proof. I mean, you assume TikTok could be used to brainwash our youth just because it's from China and then ban it. The same thing, you assume these Huawei routers could be harming us and ban them. And you neglect the fact that having cheap routers is obviously a benefit to people. And so you want to balance. I mean, how much do we benefit from having cheaper routers and how much harm do they actually do with the supposed spying?
well, to be clear, we're not talking about banning all routers manufactured in China. As far as Huawei is concerned, the telecommunication devices that are so controversial are ISP grade. We're talking about the really big routers. And yes, there is a cost savings by using Huawei over, say, Cisco, but we're not talking about the average consumer here. And these costs probably aren't going to be that significant to the average user, the average consumer. Really, these costs are going to be borne by the telcos and the ISPs.
Yeah, well, all right, we'll see. And of course, you could be right that they have some very good reason they won't tell us. But
Right.
but
And incidentally, it's not just Huawei and ZTE. There are other companies that might be caught up in this, like Hytera and Hikvision and Dahua. And I don't know about Hytera and Dahua. Hikvision is a manufacturer of cameras. So that's an interesting move there. I'm not sure if the concern is that camera feeds can be intercepted and viewed. I mean, obviously, surveillance camera could be installed in a sensitive location, so that could be a concern. I know, for example, the Chinese consulate in San Francisco uses Hikvision cameras, so they're good enough for the Chinese government.
well, I
But
don't think they would have any of this concern.
yes, there's sets of concerns.
In fact, I think they would have the opposite concern. They would say we don't want to use any American stuff for the same reason.
Right. So everybody's got different risks at play
Yeah.
here.
But I'm just thinking from an information security point of view, the other thing I'd say is rather than banning a whole product line because you think somebody might be spying on it, you ought to put some kind of sensor on your network to detect if it's sending traffic where it shouldn't. And then you'd know.
Well, yes, right. And I imagine that some organizations actually do have the sophistication to do that, although many clearly do not, including, most importantly, the U.S. government. At least many departments of the U.S. government do not seem capable of doing that.
Well, Google picked
But,
it up in 2010 when China started stealing their stuff.
well, it took them a while to figure it out.
It did.
And by which point it was too late.
Yeah,
But the other thing is that these are not trivial devices. You know, they're very complex, and I'm sure there's a lot of code in there. And it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to audit all of it, even if they did have access. And these devices might not be phoning home all the time. They would only phone home under very specific circumstances.
yeah. Well, I'd like to see an analysis. It kind of makes me want to buy some of those routers and test them. But anyway, but they're too expensive, I suppose.
I should think so, unless you've got an extra $50,000 lying around.
I could probably get a grant from Huawei,
Yeah,
but then nobody would believe my findings.
no,
It's a cold, cruel world. All right. Well, anyway, you ought to like this one from Register. It's now going to be the year of the Linux desktop coming. Linux on the desktop. And they say, but not for the reason you like, because Microsoft is putting everything in the cloud. Now your office is in the cloud, your email server is in the cloud, and now they want you to rent a cloud desktop on Azure. So really having a desktop Windows machine is not the future that Microsoft is heading towards. So you'll have the practical future is your peripheral device will be an Android phone or a Chromebook sort of thing, and you'll just view your virtual Microsoft desktop in the cloud. And this is what I'm already doing for my consulting. They just gave me an Azure virtual desktop. I connect to it on a Mac. And I think that's very likely to be the future. But you'll still want a local PC for gaming, I think.
Yeah. Although companies have tried to do streaming games and with mixed results.
It seems like it could even be better. I mean, the game could have a bigger processor and stuff if you had enough bandwidth.
Yeah, well, I don't think it works too well for first-person shooters in particular.
Mm-hmm.
You know, single-player strategy games, no problem, but the more latency-sensitive games, it is still an issue, apparently.
Well, soon it'll all be in the metaverse.
Oh,
you'll be walking around.
How could I forget?
That's right. Yeah, that seems to be the Microsoft is betting big on that. And now Apple's jumping in. I just heard on a pivot this morning, Meta just released their $1,500 headset, and Apple's going to put one out for $3,000. So it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. All right.
But so far, nobody wants it.
1991, Time Magazine put a big cover on virtual reality headsets, and oh yeah, it's just amazing.
Well, you haven't hit it yet, but we've had many prototypes since the Google Glass.
Yeah. I didn't include this story, but the U.S. government has a big contract with Microsoft to use virtual reality or augmented reality goggles, and they've been testing it, and it's not going well at all.
Yeah, it makes people sick. Yeah. These things that are like wearing a box on your head, they aren't the future. I thought Google Glass was a lot better. This nice light thing with just a little camera shining some extra things on. So you're not disoriented. You can still see the real world. That seems much more practical.
Yeah. But the social backlash to that was pretty vicious, even here in San Francisco. Like there were bars that were 86ing anybody who walked in with Google Glasses.
Yeah, well, they made the main feature that it was photographing the rest of the world, which is not the wisest thing to do.
Right.
It seems like you could clearly make another version of it that would get around that. But maybe that's what Apple's going to do for $3,000.
Maybe that's what, Apple is investing in AR, so yeah.
And I would think Apple would get it right more than anybody else, but we'll see. But they're certainly not going to sell very many at $3,000.
No.
Although I should admit I have a $1,200 phone, so maybe I shouldn't be so fast to say that.
Still, it's over double the price of that. So
yeah. All right, and you got something wrong with colleges. Is there something wrong with colleges?
Oh, is there ever? We talk about the dysfunction of higher education from time to time on this podcast.
It comes up for some reason now and then.
Yeah, for some of us, the dysfunctions of education are a permanent state of being, and it is as much a part of our lives as anything. But there's a really lengthy and good article in Slate about what's going on in higher education and out-of-state students and tuition. It's an interesting situation. This is based off of a lengthy report published by Brookings about students who are going to public universities, and they are, rather than staying in-state and going to their in-state university, the flagship university, instead they're going to a different state's flagship university, and as a result paying a great deal more. For those unfamiliar with how tuition works, university college tuition works in the US, when it comes to public institutions, if you are from out of state, if you are a resident of a different state and you go to a school in a different state, then you're almost certainly going to be paying more. And in some cases, you're paying a lot more. In some cases, like the really high-end public universities, ones that are more prestigious, like Berkeley or University of Michigan, you might be paying about $50,000 as an out-of-state student, which is just extremely expensive by any measure. So the study by the Brookings Institute actually went about trying to examine the numbers more closely and quantifying all this. And it found that out of 50 different state flagship universities, 48 of them have seen an increase in the number of out-of-state students. And some of those universities have seen the number of out-of-state students increase by 50%. This is between the years 2002 and 2018. So in 16 years.
They don't let in enough students, right? You try to get in your local one and you can't get in, so you have to go somewhere else.
Well, and this is part of the interesting dynamic, is that because universities get so much more money from an out-of-state student, they are naturally incentivized to bring in as many out-of-state students as they can. And the reason why they are especially incentivized to do this is that state governments have been cutting funding to public universities for decades now, to the point where many of these so-called public institutions get only 10% of their total budget from state funding. And this is not uncommon.
So they're essentially private schools then.
Pardon?
They are essentially the same as the private schools then.
Yes, they're resembling private schools more and more. And as I said, some of them are becoming extremely expensive, just like a private school, in fact. You know, they're charging about as much as a private school would. So you can go to Harvard and pay, I don't know how much Harvard charges, or you can go to the University of Michigan and pay about the same amount of money.
Yeah, but of course there are community colleges that are much cheaper.
Yes, and so this is a good opportunity to plug the social value of community colleges, which are still much, much less expensive than any university. I mean, and even before 2002, that was true, but it's become even more true now. It's becoming more and more difficult for in-state students to get into their state universities, into their flagship universities. Like the University of Alabama, 75% of their students are coming from out of state. 25% of students.
They probably couldn't keep the doors open without that additional revenue.
Well, and that's just the thing, is Alabama, I don't know all the ins and outs of Alabama's state budget, but it's not exactly famous for its education system, shall we say, its public education system.
Yeah.
The only thing it has going for it really at the university level is its football team and its Greek system. And apparently that's good enough to bring in a bunch of students from out of state.
Well, you know, I was just checking because in the 70s, when I was looking for a grad school, I checked the University of Texas at Austin, and tuition at that time was $50 per semester.
Wow.
Because I think they had all this oil money in Texas. And I just checked, and now it's $12,000. And the other thing, the alma mater, Edinburgh State College in Pennsylvania, they balanced their budget by making a partnership where they would bring in all these Iranian students, because foreign students are worth even more. And City College does this too. They tried to bring in a lot of foreign students, and they pay a lot.
Right.
And so they made a program. The cheapest engineering degree available in America was to go to our school for 3 years and then somewhere else like Pittsburgh for 2 years, and you get a degree from there. And so they got a flood of Iranian students that came in, and they were all they were in for like 2 or 3 years. Then the Iranian hostage crisis hit, and they all got kicked out. None of them got their degrees, and the college got in a world of trouble because they had just rushed them in without properly passing them through the right immigration papers. So it was all completely illegal. But that was their plan to make money for the college at the time.
Wow. Well, a lot of universities have gotten in on bringing in international students. Like, again, the University of Alabama was, at least before the pandemic, the #1 destination for Chinese students.
I wonder if it's the same thing, if it was the cheapest engineer degree or something.
Yeah, I don't know if it was cheaper or more cost competitive, but I doubt that's the case any longer.
Yeah, and I think you can exploit the fact that from outside the country, they don't really know the difference between different parts of the country. So any place there sounds pretty good.
Right, exactly. I would, as an American, I don't think I'd be very keen to go to University of Alabama, let alone as an international student.
Yeah, but if I was going to another nation, I would not have any clue. I would just, I'm in this nation. You're in America.
Right.
I think it's all the same.
It's an American degree. And unfortunately,
probably,
little do these international students know just how little or how low the University of Alabama is regarded.
Yeah, but if they go back home with that degree, it'd probably be regarded as an American degree.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe that's worth something.
Yeah. Well, college is pretty corrupt.
Yeah. And, you know, this is just to close out the thought here is it's not going to get any better. The problem really is that the universities have costs that just operating costs that they cannot cover on state funding alone. And so they need to get the money from somewhere. And that money is mostly coming from out-of-state tuition. And so this is not going to change until there's greater government funding of higher education. That's just the reality of the situation.
Well, you know, I question the value of the whole university system and the whole degree system. It still has a huge effect on your lifelong learning, but I wonder if there's any real basis to that. I think another future is where you just have sort of micro certificates from Google or something, and you don't go to the university anymore.
Right. And there have been a number of initiatives in the past 10, 12 years to do just that. And very little's come of that. You know, there's all this hype about MOOCs a decade ago.
Well, MOOCs totally didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. And that flopped.
Yeah.
That completely flopped.
Yeah, I had my own version of that a few years ago when I made my courses free and available to the whole world. I thought I'll be swamped with too many students, and that totally didn't happen. Turned out to be cost-free to make my stuff free to the whole world because not very many people actually want to take these classes.
Yeah. It's I don't know why. I'm guilty of this myself. I've signed up for MOOCs and then maybe I've read the syllabus and never checked in ever again, and that was that.
Well, that's the point of it. You make it available to the whole world. Most of them just want to take a quick look and leave. So it's not necessarily wrong.
Right.
You just have to lower your expectations.
Yeah. And maybe the reality is that most people just aren't very interested in taking these classes.
Well, you know, just taking a look at something is easy. Actually putting in the work in a class is a whole lot of work, and people have other things to do.
Right. So if you are in a stage of your life where it's possible to focus all of your energies on education, then it might work. But if you're busy, you're working, you've got a family, got all these other commitments, then it's impractical at best.
But in a way, this is the whole point of industry certificates. You no longer have to go to college. You just need to learn it, and you could just watch YouTube videos and do it in your home lab if you want, and then you get an industry certificate. And that really does help you get a job.
Yeah, which works in IT.
Yeah.
But
also a lot of other fields too. They're in healthcare and all kinds of certificates now.
Sure.
Catalog.
Right. And healthcare practitioners have continuing education requirements too.
Yeah.
But a lot of jobs, I don't think it's those skills are as easily categorizable or quantifiable. And so, you know, somebody who's like sales manager, um, like what kind of micro education are you going to give them?
And how much would it benefit them to have a university degree?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that there are real benefits in higher education for like civic engagement and you know greater civic participation and people just being better informed generally. But in terms of professional skills, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the fact that you are hired for more, I think the main point is you can't get promoted to management without a college degree. It is gives you gravitas and dignity and respectability or something. And I'm quite dubious of that. That is a tradition. It seems to me, for example, that military service ought to count just as much as a college degree, but it doesn't.
Yeah, well, there's clearly the college degrees have been a form of credentialism since the very beginning.
Well, yeah, and I'm questioning the actual value of that credential. I think everybody is in the industry now, especially as they keep rising the price more and more. There will come some point when it is no longer justified.
Right. In IT.
Oh, I'm thinking just in general. I mean, because many promotions require a college degree, just a generic college degree, and you're a better human being if you have a degree and you're not qualified without it. And
Yeah.
I'm dubious of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a well-founded dubiousness, but still there are other values or benefits
Oh,
from.
sure. You might do it to build your character or something, but most people don't have the luxury of that. They want to do something so they'll make more money.
Yeah, but there are, for example, communication skills that are gained by
Yes.
taking classes, learning
Yeah.
how to write an essay, argument. I mean, you could
Yeah.
say academic writing is not terribly useful in the working world. Maybe like email writing classes would be more useful, but still, writing is writing.
So this makes me thinking there should be an industry certificate in technical writing and business writing. And I would value that more than a college degree, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we'll see what happens. This is a tech disruption of things like Uber. You switch to a more decentralized, focused thing. Anyway, all right, I think that's it for this one. And I'm not sure when we're going to be back. I'm starting to do some training very early in the morning. So I'm not sure what the best time to record the next one is. We'll have to negotiate it. Farewell.